welcome all of you to the November 22nd Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018 number 7272. And as the province is now in Phase 3 of the reopening plan, question period has been reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left. And if during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. And at the start of question period, I'll call those who have signed up to the podium to address council. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, we do have one.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So just for agenda item 4A, which is the only agenda item today, we're renaming the topic title to Refuse Truck Optimization and replacing the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you very much. A motion for the option of the agenda is amended. Seconded Councillor Bonner. Moved Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. And on to the presentation. Mr. Sims, please.
Maybe I'll ask Ms. Mercer to introduce the slides, and I'll speak to it a little bit as well. Thank you.
No one wants to touch the refuse. Very bad, very bad.
If I can get the clickers. Oh, there we go. So we have one final decision slide for the committee, and it is relating to the sanitation user fees. So we had a last minute change, so we had to pull it from the November 19th presentation. And so I'll go through the changes that were made, and then we'll go through the recommendations that came out of the review. So I have two slides that speak to the recommendations that have resulted from the refuse truck life cycle and funding analysis that was done by Nielsen Strategies. And an information report was attached to the previous agenda for further background information. And Mr. Sims and Mr. Miller are here today to answer any questions relating to those. I'll give you an update on what our current draft user rates are. So for 2022, we're looking at a $202 increase. And for 2023, we're looking at a $206 increase. So these rates include the increase for the changes made to the Recycle BC designated reception facility. And we had some last minute costing updates on that, the transportation of the recycling from Nanaimo to Chemainus, and that resulted in a $1 increase for the annual fee. So we originally had an $8 increase for 2022, but with the additional costs, we needed an additional $1, so it's now a $9 increase over 2021. So that reflects all of the changes related to that transportation. So the three recommendations that have come out of the review are replace the department-owned diesel units, number 317 and 318, with fleet-owned CNG units. And there's quite a lag time between when you order them and when you receive them. So the second recommendation is to lease a CNG refuse truck to replace unit 317 until the new unit arrives. And the third recommendation was to shorten the life cycle on all fleet-owned units to 8 years. We currently use a 10-year life cycle, so this is a reduction of 2 years in that. So if council chose to approve the three recommendations, an additional $22 increase will be needed over the next 2 years. So the new annual user fee would be, for 2022, would be $216. And this would represent a $14 increase for, one, the leasing of the CNG truck until the new unit arrives, and changing the useful life of the vehicles to 8 years from our current 10. 2023 would have a $228 per year fee, and that would represent the onboarding of the two new vehicles, as well as we'd have a little bit of cost savings from the removal of the lease in that year. So this adds an additional $8 to 2023 for a 2-year total increase of $22 for the full implementation of the recommended changes. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Sims and Mr. Miller, and they can answer any detailed questions on this.
Your Worship, thanks, Ms. Mercer. I appreciate this. And apologize for this not being part of the original meeting last week. As Ms. Mercer hinted, we had sort of a very late submission of a quote from a service provider that impacted our change to our recycling facility. So we just wanted to make sure that we had those calculated correctly. But this is really part of the sort of a two-stage process for financial sustainability for the entire sanitation system. You know, the first stage was finding efficiencies that Mr. Dallaron worked on and created, about an additional 20% capacity, which was quite amazing. This was earlier this year that's been in place. The second stage really is around rationalizing the life cycle and rationalizing the fleet that we use to collect the waste. Recognize that the increase that we see, this was in the works over the course of this year when we got hit with this surprise from Recycle BC, but recognizing this is quite a large jump and it's likely to come as a shock to the users. But one thing that I would say is that we want to ensure that we don't get hit with large shocks in the future from failure of the fleet. But I'd also note that for the last 3 years, we've had an approximate 20% per year increase. So we're up 55% from where we were 3 years ago as far as waste at the curbside. So it's really challenging to continue to collect waste at the curbside and keep the rates stable. We're really responding to that. So I just want to plant that seed, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce council to Mr. Brandon Miller. Mr. Miller is our new, relatively new fleet operations manager, fleet services manager, pardon me. So he comes to us and he's already making some really positive impacts, not only within the shop, but across the organization for its fleet. And so he's well versed on this particular issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Councillor Hemmons, first off.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, Mr. Sims, did you say that our curbside collection, the volume has increased 55% over the last 3 years?
Correct, yes. So volume and weight, our weight is up, pardon me, about 55%. So part of that is we've shifted to organic, commingled organic waste, bringing yard waste into that. That's one big part. One is we provided people with larger bins, so they're taking advantage of that, which actually has had the effect of reducing self-haul trips to the landfill. So that's a good thing. The third factor that's a real challenge is in the recycling. We've spoken about this before with the online shopping, the explosion of online shopping over the course of the pandemic. That's been one of our greatest challenges, is picking up recycling.
Thank you.
Mr. Sims, I must say, and I never wish to be a hypocrite about this, because certainly I can say with confidence members of my own family are purchasing things online. I'm not much of a shopper, but that's because some people shop for me, so to speak. But I think the thing that I want to emphasize for those of the good citizens of Nanaimo who are listening, and it's been mentioned before, but I want to drive it home. Under option 1, implement recommendations. 3, shorten the life cycle on all fleet-owned units to 8 years. That's down from 10 years. It's a 20% reduction in the life cycle of equipment that gets built and created at no small carbon footprint to take care of an increasing carbon footprint that all the good citizens of Nanaimo are choosing to create by purchasing things online. Now, would there have been a carbon footprint as a result of delivering those goods to hopefully all those small businesses and stores that we shopped at formerly? Absolutely. But I think these are the consequences of things. And how do these companies make money? Because of the efficiency of packaging. You've got basically 3 standard sizes. And I'll give an example. Last night we took some very old and dear friends out to dinner, and we got talking about this very topic and the amount of purchases online. She purchased an expensive Hermes scarf, I think it is, from a secondhand shop in Victoria. And of course it came, this little scarf, which you could probably bundle up in my hand, came in a standard-sized box, which could have held, I don't know, the Encyclopedia Britannica or something. I'm exaggerating slightly for effect here. But the point of it is that we are all making these decisions daily, and they do have consequences, and they have consequences on the bottom line of what the city has to charge to try and dispose of all of this. So here endeth my rant, because as I say, my household is just as guilty of it as everybody else. But there are consequences to those multitudes of decisions we make every day as citizens and consumers, and an impact is here in front of us today. As Mr. Sims points out, there's a couple of good aspects to this. Less personal trips to the dump, but very positive. More green waste being dealt with in ways that are appropriate, but pardon my French, a hell of a lot more cardboard appearing and related packaging materials in our system. Councillor Bonner, and then Councillor Martman, and then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship. Speaking for someone who, you mentioned this part about it came in this certain size package, from someone who's actually sipped quite a lot now. That's because it costs the same as to ship that package as it does to ship an envelope. So you just buy the big packages and you throw a whole bunch more stuff in. It's much cheaper for the suppliers, which brings a point that is obviously we can't fix here, but it is something in the overall thing that we should be certainly looking at is shipping rates and all that sort of thing as well. My question though is actually, when we, because we also sit on the RDN and I sit on the Solid Waste Committee and we talk about this diversion and everything else like that, and then I just watch these numbers going through the roof of stuff that we're throwing in the garbage. And I'm wondering, we're already here. I mean, was this a mistake? I mean, like, because we used to be putting a lot less in the landfill, and now we're putting more with more bigger, expensive trucks and everything else. I'm not suggesting we're going back. I'm just saying at some time during this process, should we be also looking at how are we going to educate people to stop putting more stuff in these rather large garbage cans that are really easy to move around, right? And put, if we take the wheels off or something like that, then people just won't be filling them as much. Things like along those lines. But I think it's certainly something that I think we need to look at in the long term.
Your Worship, that's, it aligns with Council's previous direction is to, work with the regional district on their zero waste strategy for sure. And our zero waste coordinator is actively working on that. But there's some, there are some key messages I think that Your Worship put together, which was, if you want your user rates in sanitation to go down, then stop throwing out so much stuff. Might be a real key, and that does need to come out. But these rates, as Mr. Rudolph has pointed out in the past, are still well within line of many of the rates that we see in other comparable jurisdictions. Instead, we're not at the top of the heap here.
Is that a pun? Not at top of the heap.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. What I would like to do is to move the recommendation of option number 1. I'd like to speak to it.
And seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Martman.
And just very briefly, being that I was one of the ones that used to have to make a trip with my yard waste to the garbage dump, I very much appreciate the savings, actually. And I see by following the direction, which we have no choice, this is needed in our city, the first in 2022, it'll break down to an increase of $1.17 per month. And in 2023, $1.83 per month. So again, it's a bang for your buck.
Any further discussion on the motion? Not seeing any hands anywhere. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. I don't think we've got anything on question period.
Your Worship, is there one more slide, Ms. Mercer, or no?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
It was just the motion.
So I don't believe there's any questions, but let me just have a look.
Councillor Hemmons has moved adjournment. Councillor Armstrong has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to staff for attending today.